I'll test. Testing 1, 2, 3. How are you today? This is Don Schmidt, Kirk Ranella. They're Mr. Video Cameras today. So my name, I'm going to do the questions like I said, and we'll erase it all. My name is Mark Browning, M-A-R-K, B-R-O-W-N-I-N-G. They tell me I have to spell it out because people, you don't know how to spell. We get it wrong because we're going to mail them a thing. My address is 819 Wiltshire Drive, Evansville, Indiana, 47715. My phone number, we don't have to put all this phone number, then I get my email. Then it says, my father was in World War II. He was born April 14th, the day before Leonardo da Vinci, 1923. He died in 2007. He was on the LST, called Landing Ship Tank number 328, for 4 years in World War II. Around the world at 8 miles an hour at normal speed. It could go 12, but it was normal 8. And he went in the invasion of Japan. The invasion of Japan started April 1st, 1945, and was done about in June of 1945. They were supposed to do it in a week. It took 2 months, just about like Iwo Jima and Philippines and most other conquering things. Dad went a half a year or a year to St. Joe Rensselaer, Northern Indiana. It's a fish eater school, Catholic school, and it was closed about 2 years ago, but it's close to Chicago. He went there for a year and he signed up for the P-12 program. Very common program where the Army, West Point, and the Navy, Annapolis could not take care of all the officers. So 10% went to different colleges. So Dad, after he did that, he left St. Joe and they told him to go to, he went to John Carroll in Cleveland. Purdue also had one, Notre Dame had one. And they'd call them, I think, 6-month wonders or something, where they did crammed West Point in, crammed Navy Academy in 6 months, which was very difficult. They had a lot to learn, so they all became officers. Even if they didn't have college education, they became officers. And so that was a lot of the officers in the U.S. Navy, and Army, and Army Air Corps in World War II. So he was part of that. His friend named George Elstrin did it as well. So I have another uncle that went to graduate college in '43. He was not an officer because he didn't do this program. He had more education than my dad. Anyway, that was a program. So Dad went down, he had the shakedown cruise in New Orleans. LST was made, his LST was made, and they all go down to New Orleans, they're, you know, the cornfield ones, and they did the shakedown cruise in the Caribbean. But before that, they put more guns on and everything else. They outfitted more in New Orleans than they do here. Radios and also some other things. So that's what he did in New Orleans. And then he had a shakedown cruise, and I don't think they did much preparation. They had a Jeep on the ship, and I think they had a tornado or a hurricane. And that Jeep about killed him because it rolled around on the ship. They didn't tie it down.
Oh, gosh.
And it was like a great big bullet coming at him. So they learned, got seasick. They went through the Panama Canal. He was the officer in charge of getting guys back on the ship, which was not easy because they all wanted to be AWOL. They all got drunk. And he was in charge. Then they went to the Pacific, and then they went to invasion of Okinawa. Okinawa was, they said, was one of the biggest amphibious invasions ever. It's so much different. Most LSTs could not get to land because I was stationed there actually in 1978 to 79. And there's a coral reef that goes out 300 yards and then it cuts off. So if you scuba dive, you got to walk 300 yards, then you go down. So the big ships couldn't get to it.
300 yards?
300 yards, 3 football fields. And so they dynamite. If you look at the little ships come, they dynamite. The frogmen had to dynamite trails for people to come in with the bigger ships. You couldn't get big ships in because they'd get torn up on the coral reef. His ship was stuck on the coral reef for 1 day, and luckily they'd get a hole in the bottom. He also, his best friend went off the front in a Jeep, and he sunk and died or drowned. You know, the things were not, you know, they had perfected it. In Okinawa, they had things on the side of these. They would call them pontoons. They hooked them on the side of these, so when you got to shore like there, they hooked them up, and it was like a bridge all the way to land. When you look at D-Day, there was a 17-foot difference in the tide on June 6, 44. And you look at all the ships up there. You didn't do that over there. You could do it in some of the Philippines, but not in Okinawa because it's all coral reef all the way around it. So they had these pontoons that they were on the side of the ship. They wrapped them around and put them out the front. and let everybody off. It was like a bridge called pontoon. So he had to do that when he was there and let the guys off. And then he would have been part of the trail that went up to mainland Japan, where we'd have lost 500,000 troops. But then August 6th and August 9th happened, he didn't have to go. And then he came back. He was second in charge, and he came back because he, lost a lot of guys, and then, or didn't lose a lot of guys, but a lot of guys got advanced, and they came back to Charleston, mothballed in 1946. And then probably the biggest baby boom ever in the United States was 1945, 46. Then my sister was born after that. Many people were born in 46 because they came back and, they met other girlfriends or whatever. So that was his career in World War II. That was my father, and he always loved the Navy, and he became very much a patriot. When 9/11 happened, I thought I killed one of his siblings. He was so mad at other countries when 9/11 happened. I didn't realize how much he loved the country, because he knew that the United States was so good for everybody. You had freedom. You had this great country, the interstates that, we all complained, but it was such a fabulous place, and he knew it. And he was a true patriot. And I didn't see as much of that, but he would give talks. He gave talks at Day for 25 years and support all the VFWs around here. He was
your dad knew everyone.
Yeah, he shook everybody's hand in town, but did his genealogy. He was a true patriot, and he taught me to love the country. So in the 60s, on Sunday, he only had 3 TV stations. We watched mostly World War II movies. So I ended up learning World War II. Didn't know I was learning anything. But he'd sit there and watch them, I'd watch them with him. And it had pretty good TV shows on World War II.
Yeah.
Little propaganda and stuff, mostly on the United States side. Combat, but it didn't show much of the East, or the West. Much of Japan, it showed mostly of D-Day and everything else. So you missed the West, and you didn't learn that as much.
I'll ask you something. The tide's going up and down in D-Day. I mean, these guys, these LSTs coming in loaded to the hilt, and they're gonna hit the beach at high tide, I assume, and they drop that anchor way out before they ever get to the beach. And then, of course, when they start unloading everything, now they gotta get back off. I assume they wait for high tide again, then they use that anchor and reverse thruster to pull themselves back out?
They call it a LST, low something target, because it's 24-hour time that it can get shot. So during D-Day, we had the air control, but if we didn't have the air control, they couldn't. So what happened, they come in at high tide full. Its drag is 1 foot in the front and 7 in the back when it's empty. It's 7 foot in the front and 14 in the back when it's full. So we go down the Ohio River at 8 feet deep. So we get in and out. So at that time, it was absolutely full. You come in, you'd land. You would throw the anchor out about 400 or 500 yards before you landed. It was a bigger anchor than the front. And if you get on a canoe or any ship, it floats like this. The waves will push you back forward, but that anchor would hold you straight as opposed to this way, because the water's still up there.
Yeah.
And so you're anchored so the back end doesn't do this.
Right.
And that's part of it. And then the tide goes down, and then you empty it, and then the tide goes back, and you pull out the next day. And the anchor pulls you some, they turn it on, but also your engine pulls out, and you're in a deep water, and you go out. It's a fantastic ship. It was in Venezuela. They had a freshwater lake there in the 1930s, and they did oil there. And they had a ship just about like the LST. The front doors open like this, would open like this. They had problems with the front door. They had ballast that lifted up in that, and it would go from there out to Aruba and empty the oil. And that lake is still there. I've talked to people from Venezuela, and that lake is still there. You see oil wells out in the middle of freshwater lake. We got that idea from there. A submariner helped make this ship, because the ballast would lift and lower, a foot or two, like a submarine in a way. So, but that's where we got the idea, because what Churchill said after Dunkirk, he said, if you can't get men and machines to land, you're never going to win this war. And this was part of men and machines. Getting to land is the LST, 1,100 made, and essentially they built the mulberries for D-Day, and the mulberries lasted about a month, and we had the worst storm ever. The mulberries were they drug silos from England over and sunk them, and they were essentially our port at D-Day. But it only lasted a month because the storms were up. So then LSTs became important again because they lost our mulberries. And then Hitler never knew what that was. They built all these silos. They brought them, drug them over by barge and sunk them, filled them up, and then became a real nice bay or a nice port. But anyway, Dad, I would hear this all the time from him. He says, we weren't important. It was really carriers, the destroyers, everything else. It was not the LSTs, but everything was important. Like every part was part of the war. The LST was our semi during World War II, back and forth. And our LST, he got on. He came to Evansville in 2003. It was here for 2 weeks. 35,000 visitors. It was in the middle of summer in July, and probably 10,000 to get on because the line was too long. It was too hot. He never left the ship for 14 days except go home and sleep. But I watched him. He was like a little kid. And I looked at it, it brought back all the nostalgia of World War II. He walked and tell about this ship. Didn't leave it. He was 75. He would not, or 70. He wasn't healthy. He wouldn't leave the ship. Mother couldn't find him. And he would tell the ship. It was a nostalgia that I never saw before in him. And people would ask him, he would talk about it. Never left the ship. I was here 14 days. Then we got the ship fixed for us in 2005, and then 2005, 15, and then it's been an extended contract. But that ship is very important, making 167 years. So it's a big part of us. He did the broom raising. There were two things. You christened the ship when it went into the water. But after you got it outfitted, when they outfitted it and put all the bunks and everything, where they had 10 tied up or 10 tied up on the port, then you raised a broom. That was called the brooming. And he was in a uniform and he raised a broom. I have to bring a picture. He raised a broom. And that was the next 10 or 20 days where they outfitted it. And then they went and tested it. But the brooming was sort of as important as the christening. There was 167 christenings, there was 167 broomings, so it was a double ceremony.
So the brooming represented what?
It represented after you outfitted the ship. So
It was finished.
Well, you push the ship in water, it's
Right.
not finished, they hooked to the big caissons. You see the picture, big caissons,
Yeah.
2 per caisson. They're outfitting it there. That took another 10 to 15 days. It's putting the bunks in. The bunks weren't in, electricity wasn't in, and they had to do all that. They didn't put all the guns on, they didn't put all the radios on, put all this other stuff. It's like doing the wall for your house and everything else. That took 10, 15 days. So that's called, and then they had a brooming ceremony. And he was in uniform,
You
come
had
back.
to hold that broom up there.
And they had a broom up there, and we don't have a picture. We don't have the
That'd be
brooming
great if we
ceremony.
had one.
Yeah, we have broom and say, what's the broom up there for? But that's our LSD. And my mother worked at Chrysler for a secretary. She was out of college in summer. She worked at the college, and she worked there every day. And I'd ask her, and she knew a lot of stuff, but she didn't know anything because it's all top secret. You go to your work out. She said, I work for somebody, I did paperwork for her, and she didn't know anything. He actually did a little bit of the LSD, but he didn't know anything because everything was so top secret. If you look about the atom bomb and other things, people go to their job, what? Nobody wants to know anything. It's all top secret.
Yeah.
So even 2 smart people didn't know. I've talked to some kids around where they did in Chrysler built the bullets and did the tanks. He said, we would get up and look over the hill or over the fence and see all these tanks running around. He knew more than my parents knew about the tanks and the bullets and all this other stuff because he was just a kid, like you would be as a kid. So this is for Charles H. Browning and Dolores E. DeWitt Browning, and that's about World War II in Evansville. They were both natives here and they were proud of this city. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So then we got it off.